The biggest theft in Islamic history. Wasn't gold, wasn't silver, wasn't a kingdom. And it wasn't a treasure hidden inside a palace. No, this theft was far more shocking, because the target was connected to the most beloved person in Islam. And the criminals, for months, nobody suspected them, not a single person. Not even the people living in the blessed city of Madinah. But before we reveal who they were, we need to travel back nearly 900 years. To a time when the Muslim world was facing danger from every direction, wars, political conflicts, and enemies who were constantly searching for new ways to weaken Islam. Yet among all these threats, a far more dangerous plan was already in motion. A plan hidden beneath the ground, a plan so secret that almost nobody knew it existed, except Allah. Far away from Madinah, in the city of Damascus, there ruled a man known for justice, a man known for courage, a man who spent his life defending Muslim lands. His name was Sultan Nuruddin Zangi. Historians describe him as a ruler who feared Allah deeply. He wasn't famous because of luxury. He wasn't famous because of wealth. He was famous because of his devotion, his sincerity, and his love for Prophet Muhammad. But one night, everything changed. The Sultan went to sleep, like any other night. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing seemed different, but before dawn, he saw something that would leave him shaken. In his dream, he saw Prophet Muhammad. The Sultan froze. The Prophet was pointing toward two unfamiliar men, to faces he had never seen before. And then came the warning, a warning so terrifying, that it instantly woke him from his sleep. The Sultan sat upright, breathing heavily, his heart racing, his mind filled with questions. Who were those men? Why had he seen them? And what danger did they pose for a long time? He couldn't sleep again, but eventually, he convinced himself that perhaps it was only a dream, perhaps nothing more. Perhaps nothing important. But the next night, the dream returned, the same faces, the same warning, the same fear. Again the Sultan woke up, again his heart pounded, again he found himself unable to rest. Now he was worried, because dreams can be forgotten. But not when they repeat, and certainly not when they repeat exactly the same way. Still, the Sultan waited, until the third night arrived. And then, it happened again, the same dream, the same two men, the same warning. 3 nights, 3 warnings. 3 identical dreams. At that moment, Nuruddin Zangi knew this could not be ignored. Something was happening, something dangerous, something urgent, and somehow, it was connected to those 2 mysterious men. The very next morning, the Sultan called his closest advisors. But he told almost nobody the full truth. He didn't want panic, he didn't want rumors, and he certainly didn't want the wrong people hearing what he had seen. Instead, he prepared for a journey. Not to a battlefield, not to a neighboring kingdom, not to a military campaign. His destination was far more important, Madinah, the blessed city of Prophet Muhammad. As preparations began, nobody understood why the Sultan seemed so serious, why he seemed distracted, why he was in such a hurry, but deep inside, he could not stop thinking about those faces. Those 2 men. Who were they? Why had the Prophet pointed toward them? And what exactly were they planning? At that moment, the Sultan had no answers, but very soon, he would discover something that would shock the entire Muslim world. Because hidden beneath the streets of Madinah, a secret was waiting to be uncovered. And when that secret was finally revealed, people could hardly believe it. The journey began immediately. There was no delay, no hesitation, no second thoughts, because somewhere in his heart, Sultan Nuruddin Zangi knew that time was running out. The dream had not come once. It had not come twice. It had come 3 times. And every moment he waited, the danger could be growing. So the Sultan left Damascus and headed toward Madinah. Across deserts, across valleys, across endless stretches of land. But during the entire journey, one question refused to leave his mind. Who were those 2 men? Days later, the blessed city finally appeared on the horizon. Madinah, the city loved by millions. The city that held a special place in every Muslim heart. As the Sultan entered the city, the people welcomed him warmly. Many believed he had come for a normal visit. Others thought he was inspecting conditions in the region. Nobody knew the real reason, and that was exactly how the Sultan wanted it. Because if the wrong people discovered why he was there, the suspects might disappear, or worse, they might act before he could stop them. So he devised a plan, a simple plan, but a brilliant one. The Sultan announced that he wished to distribute gifts and charity to the people of Madinah, food, money, clothing, help for the poor. News spread quickly. Soon, people began gathering from every part of the city. One by one, families arrived. Workers arrived. Students arrived. Travelers arrived. Everyone came to receive the Sultan's generosity. And as they approached, the Sultan carefully watched every face, every expression, every person, because he was searching. Searching for the faces he had seen only in a dream. Hours passed, then more hours. Hundreds of people appeared before him. Yet none of them matched, not a single one. The Sultan began to worry. Had he misunderstood the dream? Had the men already escaped? Or were they hiding somewhere in the city? Then suddenly, one of his assistants approached. "There are two men who did not come." The Sultan immediately looked up. His heart began beating faster. "Two men? Who were they?" the assistant continued. "They lived near the Prophet's mosque." The Sultan's expression changed. Why didn't they come? The answer sounded innocent, too innocent. They said they do not need anything. For a moment, the room fell silent. Most rulers would have admired such people. Men who refused gifts, men who appeared independent, men who appeared religious, but after those dreams, the Sultan trusted nothing. He immediately gave an order. "Bring them to me, no delay, no excuses. Bring them now." Meanwhile, the Sultan's mind raced. What if these were the men? What if the dream had brought him thousands of miles for this exact moment? Minutes felt like hours. Then finally, the door opened. Two men entered. The moment the Sultan saw them, his blood ran cold. It was them. The exact same faces from the dream. The same eyes, the same appearance, the same men. For a brief moment, nobody spoke. The Sultan stared at them, and the men stared back. Neither side knew what the other was thinking. But one thing was certain, the search was over. The Sultan had found the men from the dream. The only question now was, what were they hiding? At first glance, nothing seemed suspicious. Their clothes were simple. Their appearance was respectable. They spoke politely. They acted calmly. In fact, many people in Madinah respected them, according to reports. They spent long hours in worship. They gave charity. They appeared generous, kind, religious, almost perfect, and that made them even more dangerous, because history has taught us something. The most dangerous deception often wears the mask of goodness. The Sultan began asking questions. "Where are you from? Why did you come to Madinah? How long have you been here?" The answers came quickly, smoothly, almost as if they had rehearsed them many times before. Everything sounded normal, everything sounded convincing. But something still felt wrong. The Sultan could feel it. The dream had brought him here for a reason, and he was determined to uncover the truth. Then he gave an order that would change everything. Search their residence, every room, every corner, every inch, because somewhere, hidden behind their perfect image, a terrifying secret was waiting to be discovered. And when the search finally began, the investigators would uncover something so shocking that the entire city of Madinah would be left speechless. The order was simple: search everything. Leave nothing unchecked, no room, no box, no corner, nothing. The Sultan's soldiers immediately moved toward the residence of the two mysterious men. Outside, everything looked normal. The house was small, clean, quiet. Nothing about it suggested danger. Nothing about it suggested a secret.
Nobody suspected them. Nobody questioned them. Because they looked like righteous men. And that was their greatest weapon. The Sultan now understood why he had seen those terrifying dreams. Allah had exposed what human eyes could not see. But one mystery still remained. A mystery even more frightening than the tunnel itself. Why? Why had they done it? Who sent them? And what exactly was their final plan? Because tunnels like this are not built without a purpose. And when the truth finally came out, the entire Muslim world would be shocked. The dream had exposed the criminals. The tunnel had exposed the plot. But the most terrifying revelation was still waiting to be uncovered. The tunnel had been discovered. The criminals had been identified. But the most important question still remained. Why? Why would anyone risk everything to secretly dig beneath the city of Medina? What was the real objective? The Sultan ordered the men to be questioned again. This time, there would be no easy answers. No prepared stories. No carefully rehearsed explanations. The evidence was already there. The tunnel existed. The secret entrance existed. And the truth could no longer stay hidden. At first, the two men continued pretending. They claimed innocence. They claimed misunderstanding. They claimed they knew nothing about the tunnel. But their words carried no weight anymore. Not after what had been discovered. Not after months of secret digging. Not after a tunnel leading in only one direction. Eventually, the story began to fall apart. Piece by piece. Lie by lie. The mask they had worn for so long started to crack. And as investigators examined their belongings, more disturbing details emerged. The men were not ordinary travelers. And they were not in Medina simply for worship. They had arrived with a mission. A mission hidden from everyone around them. According to the famous accounts of this story, their goal was connected to the blessed resting place of Prophet Muhammad. The realization sent shockwaves through the city. People could barely believe it. 4 months. These men had prayed beside them, spoken with them, shared food with them, walked through the streets of Medina, all while secretly carrying out a dangerous plan. The betrayal felt unimaginable. But something even more frightening became clear. If Sultan Nuruddin Zangi had ignored the dream, the tunnel might never have been discovered. If he had delayed his journey, the criminals might have completed their mission. If he had dismissed the warning, history could have been very different. But Allah had decreed otherwise. The plot was exposed. The tunnel was found. And the plan was stopped. Yet the Sultan knew something important. Stopping the criminals was not enough. Because if one group had attempted this once, someone else could attempt it again. The blessed city needed protection. Permanent protection. Protection that would last for generations. So Nuruddin Zangi began thinking about a solution. A solution so strong that no tunnel could ever reach its target again. No matter how much time passed. No matter who tried. No matter how determined they were. And what he did next would become one of the most remarkable security measures in Islamic history. A measure that people would continue talking about centuries later. Because the Sultan was about to transform the area forever. And his decision would ensure that this terrifying plot could never be repeated. The plot had been exposed. The tunnel had been discovered. The criminals had failed. But Sultan Nuruddin Zangi was not celebrating. Because he understood something most people did not. A danger stopped once could return again. And if it happened a second time, the consequences could be unimaginable. So the Sultan made a decision. A decision that would protect the blessed resting place of Prophet Muhammad for generations. The area had to become impossible to reach. Not difficult. Not unlikely. Impossible. Orders were given immediately. Workers were gathered. Engineers were summoned. And one of the most extraordinary construction projects in Islamic history began. Day after day, the work continued. The Sultan personally supervised much of the process. He wasn't willing to leave anything to chance. According to the famous historical accounts, deep trenches were dug around the sacred area. Massive amounts of molten lead were brought. Then something remarkable happened. The trenches were filled. layer after layer, creating a powerful underground barrier. A barrier designed to stop any future tunnel, any future plot, any future attempt. For the first time, the criminals had not only been stopped, their entire method had been defeated. The Sultan wanted future enemies to understand one thing: even if they tried again, they would fail. Even if they planned for years, they would fail. Even if they worked in complete secrecy, they would fail. Because the protection was no longer temporary. It was permanent. As news of the discovery spread, people across the Muslim world were shocked. Many could hardly believe what had almost happened. Others were overwhelmed by gratitude, because the danger had been stopped just in time. The people of Medina remembered those days for years. The mysterious strangers, the secret tunnel, the shocking discovery, and above all, the dream. A dream that had exposed everything. The more people reflected on the story, the more astonishing it seemed. Think about it. Thousands of people lived in Medina, yet nobody noticed. People walked above the tunnel every day, yet nobody knew. The criminals hid among the community, yet nobody suspected them. 4 months, perhaps even longer. The secret remained buried beneath the ground, until Allah decided it was time for the truth to emerge. And when that moment came, no plan could save the criminals. No deception could protect them. No lie could hide the truth, because Allah had already exposed them. But perhaps the most powerful lesson of all was not about the tunnel, and it was not about the criminals. It was about something much greater. A lesson that remains relevant even today. A lesson about trust, about sincerity, and about the reality that no secret remains hidden forever. Because what happened next would turn this historical incident into one of the greatest reminders in Islamic history. The tunnel was gone. The plot had failed. The criminals had been exposed. And Medina was safe once again. For most people, that was the end of the story. But for Sultan Nuruddin Zangi, the story was never really about a tunnel. It was never really about 2 criminals. And it was never really about a secret plot. It was about something far greater. Because when he looked back at everything that had happened, one question stood above all others. How was this plot discovered? Not by soldiers, not by spies, not by investigators, not by chance. It was discovered through a warning. A warning that came before anyone else knew there was danger. A warning that arrived while the criminals still believed their secret was safe. And that realization shook people. Because the deeper they thought about it, the more incredible the story became. Imagine those men for a moment. Night after night, they dug deeper. Night after night, they believed they were getting closer to success. Every handful of dirt removed from that tunnel probably made them feel more confident, more certain, more convinced that nobody would ever stop them. After all, who could possibly discover a tunnel hidden beneath a private home? Who would suspect 2 men who appeared so religious? Who would imagine what was happening beneath the streets of Medina? The answer was simple. Nobody. Nobody except Allah. And that is what makes this story so powerful. Because human beings can hide things from each other. They can hide secrets. They can hide intentions. They can hide plans. But nothing can ever be hidden from Allah. Nothing. Not a word. Not a thought. Not a tunnel buried beneath the earth. Nothing. And perhaps that is why this story survived for centuries. Not because people were fascinated by the criminals, but because they were amazed by Allah's protection. They were amazed by how a hidden plot was exposed. How a secret operation collapsed. How a danger that nobody could see was stopped before it was too late. Years passed. Then decades. Then centuries. Empires rose. Empires fell. Generations came and went. But the story remained alive. Parents told it to their children. Scholars mentioned it in their lessons. Historians recorded it in their books. And every time it was told, the same lesson echoed through history. When Allah protects something, no force on earth can defeat that protection. No matter how powerful the enemy may be. No matter how secret the plan may be. No matter how carefully the trap is prepared. Because the power of Allah is greater than every plan. And that brings us to one final thought. What if Sultan Nuruddin Zangi had ignored the dream? What if he had dismissed it? What if he had delayed his journey by a few weeks? Or a few months? History might have been very different. But Allah had already decreed otherwise. The warning arrived. The Sultan listened. The journey began. The tunnel was discovered. And the plot came to an end. A plot hidden beneath the most blessed city in Islam. A plot that almost changed history. A plot many people now remember as the biggest theft in Islamic history. And perhaps the greatest lesson from all of it is that truth does not need an army to survive. When Allah wills to expose falsehood, falsehood collapses on its own. No matter how deeply it is buried. No matter how carefully it is hidden. And no matter how impossible it seems to uncover. Because above every planner, above every conspirator, and above every secret, is Allah. And He is the best of protectors. The end.